It's 3 p.m. and we're live for the last time during these PROSTEP Insight Days 2023. We're so pleased that you've stuck with us until the end and to have so many of you with us. You know that over the last 2 days we've been discussing the challenges of the digital thread. Yesterday we focused more on solutions offered by PROSTEP. Today we're looking at consulting services, and we've dedicated this session to tracking the path to a successful PLM initiative. We want to hear from our customers as well again during this last session, and of course from you. By now I'm sure you're all familiar with the procedure. In the bottom right of your screen you'll see a Q&A box, or rather a question box. We'll be giving you the answers. So just enter your questions there, and then I'll be given them at the end of the session and I'll put them to the speakers for you. So you can be sure that all your questions will be answered. If you've missed any of the sessions, don't worry. They'll be made available online on PROSTEP's video portal in the next few days in German, and also with an English translation. So you shouldn't have any difficulty rewatching them or sharing them with colleagues or partners. Then I'd suggest we get started. To introduce this session, I'd like to welcome Senior Consultant mario.leber.
Thank you, Julia. We're going to have a brief look at the agenda for this session. I am going to talk about myths surrounding PLM. Then we have a video from Theegarten-Pactec. Dr. Winter is going to speak in that video. And then we're going to address system selection. The buzzwords, you can see them. Sarah Giese will speak about that, and then we have another video from thyssenkrupp Presta. Then afterwards, systems engineering, once again, simply to have another look to see to what extent it has to be observed within the context of PLM. Mr. Karsten Franke will take care of that. Then we have another customer, Dr. Hoffmann from BOS. And finally, person responsible for consulting, and of course your questions and our answers, which we'd like to have a look at as well. I'm going to start with the presentation announced here, myths. My past goes way back in PLM. I really started my professional life before PLM was born. At the time it was called PDM. One of the myths surrounding PLM is certainly that it's just an old thing. It's like a dead horse. You don't want to slog anymore. Or is there still life left in it? Let's have a look and see what it looks like. The topic is more than 20 years old. You can see on the right-hand side, rather small, symbolic really, 2 life cycles concerning PDM, one from the academic world, the Technical University in Berlin, which has shown electronic data management since the 80s and what has happened all the way to smart engineering in this case. And down at the bottom, one of our customers, Mercedes-Benz, what kind of data have been managed, essentially, starting from really simple spare parts, which were managed with CAD, all the way to components, and now a whole virtual system that doesn't really stop with the product you really want to sell. It goes way into services. That means actually, product data are really the backbone of every product you want to bring to market. Without consistency in your product data, which have been tested and available in large quantities, you won't be able to produce anything, and the market would not accept it. Then, with new products in the market, you normally have a much greater share of the market and can earn greater profits than with old products. And the final statement, there is really no alternative to PLM. You can certainly expand it, enlarge it, change its name, whatever you want. But the essence is really what we know, what we're familiar with, managing product data. And therefore the conclusion here is This topic is still alive and kicking. It has grown significantly, and whether you call it EDM, which is of course a smaller focus, or in future perhaps no longer PLM but SLM as an acronym for System Lifecycle Management, be it as it may, in my mind this is an evolution, not a revolution. No succession, and certainly not the death of PLM. The second myth which I would like to address is PLM an IT topic, or to be even more provocative, buy, installing and run, and that gives you PLM? Obviously that is not so. We're going to have a look at such a chart which looks like a SWOT analysis. That's what I've done. What are the drivers in order to start a PLM initiative? Okay, in the top left corner you can see the strengths from which you could start something. That's normally not the case. You will not trigger a change project like a PLM project if you already see a strength of yours in that area. But in the other three sectors, there are very well reasons for you to launch a PLM initiative. Let's take at the top right, risks. In risks, a typical case would be that you want to work differently. For instance, not document-based, but now model-based. There are also IT reasons. In this case, we have mentioned that you just don't have the sufficient capacity necessary in order to manage a complex IT landscape that you've established over years. And for this reason as well, you might get the idea that you want to change things. Then there are reasons like mergers, acquisitions, or breaking up a company, so that at least for part of your company you need a new PLM platform, or processes that are not supported. These are typical risk fields. In threats, very often they come from the outside. That means you have to document, record things which you didn't have to before, or development times, delivery times are too long, costs, time to market is way too long, and then PLM can offer significant advantages. You can also see it as an opportunity. These opportunities are communicated either by the vendors or consultants, such as us, as PROSTEP, or new members of staff, new managers who have seen this in other companies before. The conclusion? Yes, IT is part of the PLM story, but the main role is played by the divisions that have to work with it later on. The third myth that I would like to show you, it could be assumed that once you've run one PLM project, the others are going to be really easy. If you know one, then you know them all. I think that is really the biggest mistake you can make, because every company differs significantly from others, and it has to behave differently in the market, because otherwise it wouldn't have any USP. Who would want to buy a product that has no USP, no features of its own, regardless whether it's the price or technical features? And that leads to entirely different functional requirements towards such a PLM system, organizations possibly entirely different in the IT architecture, which you have to embed the PLM in. Authoring systems, for instance, they're also very different. We have our capability map here now, and these really are typical requirement profiles. We don't want to look at it in too much detail, but you can see that the colors are sometimes quite different, and your PLM projects will vary just as much. You're speaking to entirely different people. The processes you focus on are very different, and that means you have a completely different project to deal with. The conclusion to draw from this is definitely not. You cannot draw conclusions from one PLM project for the other. To implement it, you need a whole lot of tools so that for your specific PLM project you can choose and combine the right things. The last myth that I would like to present: PLM projects are always absolutely chaotic. Most PLM projects are over budget, don't meet their timeline, and certainly not all the functional goals you've set. And actually that does happen very often, which is a great shame. You invest, you set up a plan, And finally, you don't achieve your goals, or it ends up being much more expensive than planned. So what can you do about this? I'd like to show you what we have come up with. Make sure that on the one hand, you run a good analysis so you can plan on solid basis everything you need in the company. What is your strategy? Who are your stakeholders? What do they want? What requirements are there? And as already said, in every company that is slightly different. Once you have a good analysis, a decent basis, you can run a good definition. That allows you to set up a reasonably good plan, even if you have to allow for this plan perhaps changing. There is hardly a PLM project that starts with a plan and fulfills this plan all the way to the end with no changes, because you learn a lot during the project. You've got to keep that in mind, and sometimes requirements and the surroundings change. And the third point, and I would say that is actually the most important point, if you don't have the people you can implement such a project with, you might as well not bother. That means you have to clarify what roles are there in the project, the resources have to be clear, and these resources have to have the know-how. Possibly they can be trained, but you have to have them in the project. Of course, you have to motivate the team, and above all, you have to reach agreements with the people in charge of the lines and allow for enough training. And this way also the fourth myth can be debunked. So make use of all these keywords. That's what I had to say about myths.
Yes, exactly. That was very practical advice. Thank you for that. And I think what it really comes down to is that PLM shouldn't be underestimated. And this is exactly what Theegarten-Pactec thought. They got in touch with PROSTEP, and we now have a video for you to give you an idea of how they work together on PLM.
Hello, my name is Dirk, and I'm a change manager for Theegarten-Pactec. We are a specialist for development and implementation of packaging machines. What can I say about internal change projects, regardless whether these are reorganizational or IT projects? At the end of the day, every internals project aim is to initiate change, and nobody really wants change unless you have direct and immediate positive effects on your personal work. In the PLM environment, it's essentially the same, and on our PLM initiative, you can see very clearly that various interests are competing with each other. Individuals' personal interests, the divisions or sites, versus the company's interests. And from my point of view, it's very important that we always keep in mind that we want to look at what's beneficial for the whole company. We have to work as a whole company, not just in divisions. In our specific case, Theegarten-Pactec, in 2018, we started launching a PLM initiative, essentially with two main goals. One, increasing productivity and also throughput of our two main business processes. Obviously, that is managing customer orders and innovation in product and development processes for our systems. And on the other hand, we simply wanted to back up the company's know-how. For the entire corporate architecture, we followed a comprehensive holistic process for processes, IT systems, and also information. And PROSTEP accompanied us right from the beginning. In 2018, we started with two analysis projects, one following on the other, one PLM with PROSTEP and another one for IT architecture quite generally, to document the requirements, assess the requirements and structure them. The result was a roadmap, a strategic roadmap for internal change projects. PROSTEP, together with us, defined the PLM initiative and structured it, and there we ended up with 4 different smaller projects. We carried them out together, which all took about 4 to 7 months. Within these projects, PROSTEP was, on the one hand, internal partner, also moderator of workshops, but also very clearly a partner with lots of experience in PLM. Our PLM initiative, after the system selection in 2020, has reached a point at which we now are implementing PLM software in our company, We're implementing our PLM projects independently with our partner. Again and again, we encounter situations in which we address PROSTEP as a trusted advisor or a consultant and moderator. What success factors are there in such change initiatives? You can read that up in any textbook, but you can't repeat it often enough. From my point of view, what is important is you need to have a clear and known starting point. You have to know where you are, otherwise you don't know how you can develop where from where. The second point is you have to have realistic objectives. And these objectives, I think, and I have just explained that briefly, have to be achieved from the perspective of the entire company. Next point is you have to consult everybody from early on, the business line, all the way to business management. It is important to run small projects which follow each other in iterative steps, so you don't have too many irons in the fire at once. It's very important that you get know-how in consulting where you need it. In collaboration over the last 5 years, it has become absolutely clear that PROSTEP consultants really pursue these success criteria actively, and that we can always call on our PROSTEP colleagues when we have any questions concerning content, should it be technical questions for PLM and also change management. I think that without PROSTEP consultants, we would not be at the position we have reached today. And from my point of view, it makes absolutely no sense to try and pursue this journey, PLM initiative, alone without any external assistance, because for that, PLM and the changes associated with that is far too complex. Best wishes from Dresden.
Thank you, and all the best to you as well. Obviously, selecting the system as part of a PLM initiative is a decisive point. Is it possible to quickly arrive at meaningful requirement specifications? That's something our next speaker will explain. She is a PLM consultant at PROSTEP. I'm so pleased to welcome Sarah Giese. Yes, when implementing a PLM initiative, selecting a suitable system plays a key role in the overall outcome. It connects the different worlds. Thank you. So there are different approaches you can take to selecting this kind of system. You could observe the market and look at what your competitors are doing and see whether it might work for you, or adjust it so that it does. This leads to different questions. For example, will the system I've selected also fulfill my users' requirements? Will my IT requirements be fulfilled? Is the system suited to my corporate situation or initial situation? And obviously, this decision also needs to be justified. How do I know that I haven't made the wrong choice when I just select a system? You don't have to put maximum effort into selecting a system in all cases, but there should be a consolidated requirements profile to pool the different requirements from the different areas to ensure that there are no contradictions in expectations at the end. You can also only estimate how much time and effort it will take to implement the system later on when you know the circumstances and goals for implementation. Let's just imagine what the ideal PLM initiative might be. When we talk about system selection, we look in particular at steps 4 and 5. Ideally, you've conducted a needs analysis with all stakeholders, documented and consolidated the results, and derived the heat map of PLM capabilities, which you also saw in Mario's proposition number 3, to then agree on a proposal for the roadmap. In the first steps of the implementation projects, you've developed a technical concept with the later user area by means of use cases and coordinated a development architecture with IT. As a result, you've arrived at your consolidated requirements profile to help you select a system. Using the requirements profile, you can now identify and assess a suitable solution from providers on the market. Making sure this assessment is objective, transparent and comprehensible is the next challenge. You probably won't find much suitable experience for any assessment criterion in your company. When selecting a system with our support, we develop a suitable requirement specification. This is based on PROSTEP templates. There's a 150% document for this, and this is used to create an individually adjusted requirement specification for you. For example, there's different weighting for the requirements, and there might be KO criteria for you. This would also be coordinated with the stakeholders. When selecting a system, do you believe the marketing statements of the providers alone? Probably not. A neutral, experienced consultant can be a great support here. But something that's even more helpful is written questionnaires filled out by providers or system demonstrations of different use cases that you also selected. Here, it's not just functional requirements that are considered, but also non-functional requirements. For example, the system's maintenance requirements, implementation effort, or integration capability, and many others. To conclude the functional assessment part, we now come to the most resilient step, selecting the benchmarks. Here you have the providers demonstrate the scenarios you've chosen and show a selected stakeholder group. As a rule, 6 to 10 important use cases are identified and presented, and on the basis of this, you should then arrive at a ranking of the different providers. If you still have any doubts, you can always carry out a pilot implementation with 2 systems, for example. This would of course be very time-consuming, but it should set your mind at rest. If you carry out system selection with PROSTEP, we've already considered all the possible scaling of PLM selection projects, and our tools and process models are customizable and scalable. And once you've chosen a tool and made your decision, it's time to implement it, but that's another story of the PLM initiative. Well, thank you very much for that, Ms. Giese. So I think it's time to turn to the practical side of things now. We wondered how the automotive supplier thyssenkrupp Presta deals with all this, and you'll be given the answer in 2 videos now.
Hello, my name is Klaus Brandner, and for more than 15 years I've been working for thyssenkrupp Presta in product data management. In the meantime, our company can look back on more than 80 years of history and has been operating globally with more than 10,000 people at 17 sites. In order to live up to our customers' requirements, over the last few years, we have developed our products in mechatronics and also developed our own competencies in software development. Our processes, though, unfortunately, at many points are very much mechanic-oriented. And we wanted to change that. That was the point at which we got assistance and got PROSTEP on board. PROSTEP, above all, supported us in setting up a spec for tendering a new PLM system. Now we are already in the post-spec phase. That means we're in implementation of a new PLM system, and again we can draw on the experiences that we gathered while we were putting together the spec together with PROSTEP. We know that way we have set an important pillar for the creation of a new PLM system, but also that we're going to be working with this for many years yet. With the right partner on our side, like PROSTEP, though, such a mammoth project can also be managed. Best greetings to Darmstadt, to the Insight Days from Liechtenstein. My name is Alexander Kühn, and I've been with thyssenkrupp Presta and Liechtenstein since 2002. I work in IT, and there, above all, I'm responsible for questions concerning product lifecycle management. Our current PLM system has been in use for more than 20 years, and regularly more than 2,500 users work with the system. Over time, we have noticed that the requirements that are put forward to the system had become more and more difficult to implement. And additionally, the maker of our current PLM system wanted to discontinue support for this system in the foreseeable future. All of that motivated us to start thinking about a new solution in PLM. For our future PLM solution, we decided on Siemens products, and we were supported by PROSTEP in selecting the system. This support was highly systematic and professional and helped us an awful lot to accomplish this phase successfully. In the meantime, the implementation phase for our new PLM system has been started, and we're focusing on replacing the current system and our current system landscape. We're focusing on requirement management and CAD data processing. Until later on, we'll talk about data and product structure and part list. Quite generally, it's very important that with our future PLM solution, we can offer our users a solution that is ready for the future, that will accompany them in challenges for their workplace with success. Best wishes from Liechtenstein to the Insight Days to Darmstadt.
Thank you. Those were some very specific insights into the subject. So we thought this would be the right moment to start up a discussion with you again. We've prepared another survey. You all know how it works by now. So please do start voting. Just end your full screen view so the video is smaller. And then you should see the survey in the bottom right of your screen. Then just select the answers that apply to you. The first thing we'd like to know from you is, when selecting a system for your last PLM project, was there a comparative system benchmark with key users? We're interested to know what you think. Just to add, your answers are completely anonymous, don't worry about that. Nobody at PROSTEP or elsewhere can see your responses. We just want to get a general idea of what people think. So I ask Mr. Leber, what do you think the responses will be?
I'm afraid that very often these benchmarks are not done for users. We see that very often, unfortunately, although it's very helpful and can pick up a lot of employees where they are, make them look forward to this new system once you've seen this system. I'm really excited to see the result because I don't know what kind of representatives are behind the screens at the moment. At the back end, yes.
At the back end.
But my assumption would be that it wouldn't be more than 50%. But I can see, yes, we can see a slight trend here.
That way.
If you're wondering why we keep on staring down, we've got a screen there, and at the moment we can see 22%.
And we have 22%, and that's a great number. 22% no, 30% say yes between two systems, and it hasn't changed yet. 44% say yes between more than two systems. What's your assessment of this?
That surprises me positively, I must say, but what does not surprise me is that when you run such a benchmark, that very often you do it between these two systems. So you've got a kind of head-on-head race. The others have been eliminated, and then such a benchmark is particularly valuable and might actually lead to a decision. But I would have said there would have been more no's, so I'm quite positive about this because, as already said, such a benchmark helps us tremendously to generate motivation, and it's a good preparation for the future with the new system.
It's great when people already have the right idea. So now let's think back to the two videos we just saw from thyssenkrupp Presta. It came out very clearly that systems engineering is very high on the PLM agenda. But whether that's the case for all PLM projects or whether it varies is something we'd like to address now. And to do so, we have Senior Consultant for PLM, Karsten Franke.
Yes, systems engineering in the context of product lifecycle management, product development. From a huge cruise ship all the way to a small electric toothbrush. In every interesting product these days, we have hardware. There are chips, software inside. That means we really always do have a development of a mechatronic system. That brings up quite specific challenges, and we have positioned them in our V model. The first very characteristic challenge is, of course, collaboration via these domains: mechanic development, control device development, software development. And we need to be certain that the software will match the chip, or if I put in a new chip, will that develop more heat? Do I need better cooling? Will that have an effect on the mechanics? Do I need a bigger housing? All of these things have to be closely coordinated. Also typical for software development are much higher takt rates. Thinking of Tesla today, it's quite common practice these days that a product is supplied in hardware, and over time value is added, more functions are added by software. So how can I assure that the software will run on all these further developed products with more variants possibly? The next challenge is also the thread. That's quite clear too. If I look at the requirements at the top left of the V model and work my way through, at the bottom right I end up with the product which is ready for lease, perhaps ready for production. How can I follow, how can I track that all the results reached along the way have been generated correctly, through which process steps, which input data, particularly when you look at things like security relevant systems, ACE price, etc. You're not going to be on the winning side if this thread, particularly when you can't deliver that in context with security related issues. That brings us to validation. Should it be technical, physical, simulative or virtual? You can only see this here in the top layer, but of course that applies to the bottom levels as well. Subsystem component part, you have to be able to document at any time that a particular verification result, a test result, was achieved with the most recent update of the product, including software, so that your most up-to-date verification case was applied and that actually all cases are covered. If we have a look at 2 and 3, you always have this connection, this link, this traceability. That means traceability is a very important asset, an important functionality which you have to establish. Once you have it, it's not a big step to generate benefits from it. To say, okay, I can go through the path in reverse or reverse the path actually and carry out impact analyses all the way to the digital twin. Because if I were to imagine that the V model were to continue on the right with production planning, production operation, and possibly also with recycling of the product, then this understanding for the system, this system model we need, is of course a fine starting point. I would say it's actually indispensable. That means systems engineering generates the methods as a basis to address all of these points. And as already said, we need a common model, which should certainly not be a huge monolithic system, but a network model. So I have a view from one software, which I can switch to another, from a test case to the requirements. I need this model, and that is why it is called model-based systems engineering. Once we have that, then you could also use ISO 10007 configuration management We have to see which artifacts have been produced over time. So that's state of the art in terms of documentation. So you're on a solid foundation here. Systems engineering is going to open up an entirely new angle, a new view of the product system and its development. And very often it's necessary to grow from the pure PLM mechanics world to systems lifecycle management. For this, we need a holistic view. If the problem itself is holistic, then obviously you need a holistic solution. And that is why we're using a proven PROSTEP approach, an approach that we would generally also use for our tool selection. In our case, it's about methods. Systems engineering is above all a method. So that means it's sufficient to look at the first two steps initially. They can be broken down. We can see on the left a big picture. So it's good that at the beginning you think about what the key competencies are. What does my company actually have to be able to do? And that means the people there, obviously, in order to master the specific challenges for my product systems. What are the most important points and what are perhaps not so important competencies that I have here? Then we like to recommend a systems engineering maturity assessment, SEMA. We'll show that in detail in the next slide. You have to determine your as-is and your target. Then you can look at the gaps. How big are these gaps? What steps have to be taken? That reminds us of our colleague's presentation from Theegarten-Pactec. We have to know where you come from, because otherwise, if I don't know the gaps, I don't know how much work it will be. So I need that as a basis for my planning. Then, after analyzing these gaps, recommendations for actions are given. These can be major tasks, but they can be lots of small ones too. And it makes sense in that case to group them in fields of action. That would be the fourth step. And finally, of course, there are always dependencies. I can only take one step after I've completed the previous one. And that has to be taken into account when I set up a roadmap. Mid-term to long-term planning, what has to be done in order to get your systems engineering up and running. As said, let's look at systems engineering maturity assessment. We can see 5 columns. These are these 5 maturity levels. And we're following well-known best practices from the toolboxes in Industry 4.0. We have 8 domains which we've identified, which have to be analyzed with respect to maturity. And on PROSTEP side, we have systems engineering specific aspects we've integrated and also focused on. In the videos, in the presentations, we heard again and again that we're facing the situation in a change process of picking up the people. Training has to be carried out, that is necessary. Possibly even certain things about your organization have to be changed. And in order to accomplish this successfully, it is essential that you also think about the stakeholders. What do they expect? Because there are a lot of people who put their hopes in a new system, a new software, a new method. Rightfully so as well. It is possible that you'd have to explain to them that their hopes will be met, but possibly not in the first quarter. Otherwise, you might lose them on the way. There are also people who have concerns, fears. You've got to take that very seriously. And you should not be frightened by people saying, we've always done it this way, why should we do it differently? And overcome their concerns. Because if I don't have a large majority of stakeholders joining you on this ride, then experience has shown there is a great risk of the whole project failing. Boundary conditions are points concerning the situation in different sites, my hardware environment, are there any software restrictions? Am I really on a greenfield site, or is it a brownfield approach? Do I have to restrict myself in some way? In summary, this is the last slide. We're going to head towards the roadmap when I have the maturity, fields of action, framework conditions, stakeholders. Once they're known, then I can address that and I can set up a roadmap. And I would also recommend these days not to do it according to a waterfall system, but be agile, short sprints, small improvements, small increments, so everybody can see we are making progress, perhaps not as quickly as you'd hoped, but there is progress, people stay optimistic, and you have the chance to see when things change, when there are new requirements, others become less important, you can also respond. You don't have to wait for half a year or a year before the full project is completed. I was only able to show you the tip of the iceberg in these few minutes. We're really looking forward to your questions, getting in touch with you. Our systems engineering team will also be ready to speak to you in a more profound way.
Exactly. Thank you for this talk. We thought now it would be a good time to hear from some of our customers. We're now going to hear from another automotive supplier, BOS. Let's watch.
My name is Jörg Hoffmann, and I have been at BOS for 3.5 years in IT. BOS is a mid-sized automotive supplier. We are first-tier supplier for all the large OEMs globally. Particularly, we supply interior components like armrests, covers, side window covers, but also exterior components like, for instance, boot flaps or also glass roofs. Our company is set up globally. We have sites everywhere where our customers can be found. And my job at BOS is that in IT, the IT architecture is to be designed, IT strategies have to be developed together with my boss. And in this context, our digitalization projects have to be accompanied, and particularly, I manage our PLM introduction project. Of course, BOS, for many years now, has been equipped with a PDM system. We manage our CAD data, and beyond that, though, we work a lot with Excel. Projects are not continuous all the way into the factories, and that is why 2.5 years ago we started a PLM initiative with the objective that from the customer requirements to hand over the factory, the entire process can be sorted digitally. For us, the first major challenge was to find out what can software actually offer in this process, and PROSTEP helped us with their capability map to understand what requirements a PLM system can typically fulfill, what functions it has, and that way, for us, we were able to assess what was important for us relatively quickly and develop a specification and select a supplier and finally choose the final offer. In the moment, we're implementing the system, carrying out final tests. Our objective is to go live this year, but you can tell that this entire PLM path is a relatively complex one, particularly when for many, many years we've been working with existing legacy projects or processes. These are a whole list of different subjects, and we're still discussing what a target-oriented solution is. For instance, what will our numbering system look like? What part alignment? How are we going to design individual processes in PLM? And then again and again, we can go back to PROSTEP. Their consultants help us to find a good solution together, and we can implement that together with our implementation partners. PLM is a path of which we have not reached the end for a long time yet. The thread of our processes, particularly the interface of production and development, can be designed more seamlessly, and in future we will be able to address our PROSTEP consultants, who we see as trusted advisors, and they help us again and again to reach the right decisions. I hope I was able to take you on board and present what we are working on in PLM at the moment, and best wishes to PROSTEP Insight Days from BMS.
That's very kind, thank you for that. And I would suggest we now start a discussion on the points that we've covered today and will continue to come up in your companies. Everyone who was watching this morning will remember Martin Strietzel, or have maybe met him while working together with PROSTEP. He heads the consulting department at PROSTEP, so hello and great to have you with us.
Hello, it's been an exciting day.
Yes, it was a very exciting day, so it might be wise just to check. We spoke a lot about PLM in consulting. Does that mean that we've covered all the relevant consulting services provided by PROSTEP, or is there anything we've missed?
We made an effort to go through PROSTEP's offer and present our philosophy, PLM architecture, PLM processes, and accompany people. We started with the challenges, almost societal challenges, which we are aware of, and they take us to sustainability quite quickly, and we wondered what our topic has to do with sustainability. How can we support our society in that way? What are companies doing to promote this topic? We have learned that even these UN goals for sustainability allow us to pin down certain things, that industrial development and industrial growth, high-tech companies are necessary, because that way higher stability can be achieved. With that in mind, we addressed companies' individual challenges. We have recognized that product complexity in times when you're speaking of products defined by software, systems are a major challenge, often connected with other large companies. So you have to find solutions for big player collaboration. So working with a big partner requires completely different rights issues. We have looked at technological concepts such as semantic networks, ontologies, cloud and platform computing, and seen how that can contribute to digital twin and digital thread developing in PLM infrastructures, so that concepts that are necessary in digitalization, of which we hope that they will offer us progress, can be achieved. Concepts like digital twin are also the industrial metaverse or digital thread. On this basis, we have shown that PLM architectures are extremely important infrastructure in order to give life to this digital twin. We had this image that the infrastructure is the digital twin's home. And then in the second and third part, we took you through PLM architecture, and now in this final session, our action model, and in detail how we want to establish our steps together with you as a customer and what we do in detail in our consulting. Implicitly, and Mr. Hoffmann has mentioned this already, and it's also been mentioned in various sessions before, trusted advisor. This is a role in which our experienced consultants enter, and they become a kind of training partner for project managers. They become the project manager's coach. They become ad hoc decision makers and also solution finders based on their experience. They become the link between IT and the divisions and the customer on the one hand and system vendors on the other. That is a role that we haven't mentioned so far, I suppose.
So it's good that we did that now. In general, just listening, it appears to be a very broad scope. Where do the consultants get their skills and the knowledge that they need to provide these coaching services?
All of this only works based on many years of experience. And establishing this experience throughout many, many projects is a path that we want to go through with our young consultants, and the experienced consultants have all been through this process and continuously moving on. We're actually continuously learning in projects with you. This experience is gathered in hands-on contact with tools that we work with, CAD tools, software development tools, PDM tools, process modeling tools or architecture modeling tools, SysML tools, systems engineering tools that we work with. Working on these is important in order to be a real partner for our customers who understands what this day-to-day business actually means on the customer side. Of course, we gather a lot of experience within the projects, but we also are active in institutions and associations like the PROSTEP Association and Fuga, presented current ideas and challenges PROSTEP is facing at the moment. But we also are active in the Society of Systems Engineering, or VDA, or Systems Engineering, where continuously existing processes and methods are further development, particularly our big hobby, data structures, data models, data formats, and standardization, where PROSTEP is very active. We also contribute here, and that helps us to stay on the ball, and we have a decisive role in designing the community.
Which is obviously important. Something you mentioned in your previous answer was trusted advisors. I can imagine that they're probably most sought after by customers. How can you ensure that everyone can benefit?
Yes, exactly. Trusted advisors are in high demand, and provision of staff, resources in these projects is of course always a challenge for all of our service providers. We always staff projects with teams, normally have 2 people, a consultant or a senior consultant, a principal, and a second person, a principal consultant, so that we can focus on the respective activities and you can support each other. The more experienced person takes the role of this trusted advisor and focuses on that. Very often, this kind of work is done in direct, close contact with the project manager and the actors on the customer side. This personal contact is, of course, the most important thing about it, setting all that up. But very often, this is not an activity in which you can spend 40 hours a week with the customer. You address specific topics in individual conversations, quite specifically, sometimes get together ad hoc because a certain question has to be resolved. And that way, with a little bit of respect and planning ahead, that can be accommodated for quite well. So we always have the opportunity to involve the right people in these projects and play the role as a trusted advisor.
That sounds like a very good exchange on both a professional and personal level.
Yes, that's the most important thing, that this trust is developed. These are long-lasting projects, and the role of the coach or the trainings partner is a matter of trust, so that this relationship can really develop. These PLM projects run over several months normally, sometimes over several years, and once you've done it for several years, or in my case for 20 years I've been active in this field now, then you can tell that these topics just keep on going. Things keep on evolving. Surprisingly, it keeps on, it retains its interest. It's still interesting. You keep on finding out things that were still visions 10 or 5 years ago only, and now they're reaching the practical world. Artificial intelligence is at our doorstep. Everybody's thinking about what AI can do. Simulation that you might have grown up with at university has become an increasing part of PLM projects now. is a matter of routine. We heard of the digital-first strategy today, that you can really trust your digital data more than reality. It would seem absurd, but that really is the way we're developing into the digital metaverse, and it's necessary to think in these terms because otherwise development processes would take far too long. And you have to work digitally. We want to work digitally. We want to continuously work digitally, and that means digital first is also an aspect, something you continue developing, and it remains exciting. Sometimes we carry out very complicated things and they work because the team works together well. You have experienced partners on both sides and things just work really well. And sometimes really simple things make you think, well, that's something we should be able to handle really quickly, and they tend to be more difficult than you thought. And at the end of the day, and that's what's so nice about this job, essentially it's about getting people together, working with people, and making the best of the situation. And I think that also today's event has shown that it can be very successful, and I'm really happy that you're accompanying us all the way to the end.
Absolutely, I can only agree. That's a good sign. As I already seem to be asking so many questions, I'll just continue. We've received your questions, so that's good news, and I'll pass them on to our speakers now. Is a Big Bang introduction an option for a PLM solution? Mr. Leber?
Yes, I'm glad to answer, because in almost every implementation project this question pops up. Whatever you've specified, can that all be introduced in one big bang? Can it be brought to the customer? And our experience has rather been that that happens very rarely. Normally you have a kind of release plan in which functionalities are set up in the new system. Normally, as far as the old legacy system had established processes in order to replace them there, but in the specs, very often you have far more requirements than the old world was able to support. And while perhaps the first part was used productively, increasingly you're going to introduce functionalities. A big bang, from my point of view, is neither necessary nor such a low-risk strategy that I would actually want to do it. So you can stretch your introduction process, and I wouldn't speak of a big bang, I would speak of an iterative release, a rollout.
Okay, thank you for that. Are there any examples of situations where operating two PLM solutions in parallel for an extended period of time makes sense? Perhaps you could answer that one?
You could do that. Well, parallel operation of two different PLM solutions often is necessary and makes sense because we've just heard the risk in a big bang, that means changing everything in one go, is extremely high. Managing all that at once, that's why it's a pragmatic and necessary solution to operate two systems in parallel. There are also situations in which, due to company mergers, you just end up with two different systems, and it's only a particular process allows you to establish which system is going to take the lead at the end. Managing that is, of course, a challenge. On the one hand, we have a lot of project experience, particularly based on our migration tools, which allow such parallel operation of systems and support it. But on the other hand, the overriding logical architecture, you have to have guiding systems, you need particular ownerships to be defined, who does the data belong to, which system is leading. These data structures have to be mapped for each other because each system has its own model that it's based on, and in order to manage that, it's a challenge. But that's also one of PROSTEP's specialties.
That's good to hear. Next question, what role does MBSE tooling play in introducing systems engineering? Yes, it's your turn.
Yes, tools, they're important, but are not, but only a means to an end. Tools are there so that your business processes or business capabilities can be supported as best they can. If you have a suboptimal process, the best tool is not going to help you. You're going to generate costs and lose money. That is why first your process capabilities, and when that's high and dry, you can start thinking about the tool.
Thank you. Then I seem to have just one last question. In your opinion, what is the greatest obstacle faced when introducing systems engineering? Who'd like to answer that? Shall we stick with you? You have the floor.
I think we've addressed this before already. It might be sloth. Our colleagues from Theegarten have addressed this as well. Very often it's people's lack of desire to change and support changes. And I can only repeat that it's important to pick up people, see where their concerns are, and try and remedy these concerns and remove them.
Thank you. You'd like to add something? Please do.
Yes, I would like to add something at this point. I can remember a master's thesis that we did not so long ago. What inhibits, what stops the introduction of systems engineering in companies? And we also asked companies about it. And it wasn't the technology, it wasn't the tools. They still have their problems. They might not be all that user-friendly. The interfaces can be difficult in SysML tools, but the main problem was actually people, very particular people, middle management, because they will lose their influence, the power, and become insecure. At top management, that's when you normally find people who find the vision cool. They want to do it. And at the bottom, the experts, people who work in the divisions, members of staff. There, people have almost come to terms with things changing again and again, and systems engineering is not a revolution for a lot of people. But middle management has to be convinced. They have to be taken by the hand, one by one, and they have to understand that it's a benefit for them too. As already said, it's not the technology, it's the organizational obstacles.
But in the end, I'm sure communication helps. At least it worked well here. Thank you to all our speakers in this session, but also to all those who spoke in other sessions yesterday and today and are probably watching. I'd also like to thank you for watching and asking questions, because we've now officially come to the end of the PROSTEP Insight Days 2023. I hope you learnt a lot. I had a very good time. It was great that so many of you got involved, asking questions and voting in the surveys. All the best, stay healthy, and see you again soon.